in some ways, all of us have been involved in the life of a thriving city. Across time and space, cities have performed different functions: political, administrative, religious, cultural, economic, military. Very often a combination of these functions. I like to see cities as nodes in neural networks. A city is not comprehensible in itself. A city can't even feed itself. A city makes sense only in relationship to its connections to a wider network. The richer the network, the more diverse the network, the wider the network, the more opportunities become available in the city. And the more it generates ideas, the more it creates a surplus, the more it's attractive to itinerant talent. As cities have always been a magnet for weird and wonderful people. To have networks, you need connectivity. So from ancient times, cities have grown along waterways. By the sea, the waterways were the original internet. The moment you reach the shore, you are connected to all shores by boat. Then with road and air communication, other lines of transportation have become more important. And with the information revolution, we are now in instantaneous contact across the entire world. Not fully. I mean, the video and the audio may be perfect, but there's nothing which can provide the full bandwidth of an intimate meal together. When we not only talk to each other, we observe body language, we watch how others affect our interactions. So connectivity is very important. Connectivity can be natural. Connectivity can be created. It's not just physical connectivity. Very often, you may have a door, but the door is blocked to you. You may have an airport, but the airport is not connected to the city you want to go to. You may be on the shore, but there's no boat to take you to your destination. So you need protocols, agreements among cities, between countries to say, look, we're open to each other. These are our immigration procedures. These are our quarantine procedures. Today we may have excellent physical connectivity, but our real connectivity is close to zero because of COVID. We can't even go to Malaysia freely. So the software of connectivity is also very important. Beyond that, cities are built on trust. When we travel, there must be a sense of physical safety. When we negotiate, there must be an underlying trust that an agreement can be enforced, that there's legal recourse if there's a dispute, that property is protected, and that there's physical safety, a certain predictability. And this trust is quintessentially human. Trust cannot be codified. In Southeast Asia, we have 100 ways to say no without saying no. In fact, you should never say no because that's impolite. And the ability to sense nuance is so important. Cities are therefore not just nodes of trust. They are nodes for networks of trust. So there is a Chinese network. During the war in Indochina, you could have an agreement, meet in Singapore and collect your money in Phnom Penh because of a Teochew network. There's a Wenzhou network. There's a Hakka network. Jews, Parsis, Sindhis, Armenians, Lebanese. Joe Kotkin in his book Tribes, I think it was written in the early 70s, talked about how the most interesting cities are those which are also nodes for different tribal networks in the world. And we have multiple tribal networks in Singapore. But when you have multiple networks jigged by Zhao, there's always conflict. And they must feel at ease here, comfortable here. I once worked with Frank Benjamin to create conditions for a Jewish school to be established in Singapore. He told me that more and more Jews were coming to Singapore because of Sands Casino, because of opportunities in Asia. And without a Jewish school, Jewish families cannot take root here. And if Jewish families cannot take root here, the network cannot be strong. Every network needs facilities for its families, for education. It needs cultural amenities. It needs sacred spaces. It's been a pleasure for me to help the Russian Orthodox Church, and TAIPEI got involved in this, to build a Russian Orthodox Church in Singapore, because for Russians, the church is a center, not just of their religious life, but of their cultural life. You know, the Russian Foreign Ministry remembers me not for bilateral relations, but for my work in helping to establish this church. When we respect what is important to members of a tribe, they come and they bring along not just individual brains, doctors, engineers, architects, they bring along networks, and networks are very valuable. You have a network, you're a center for multiple networks, the arbitrage opportunities are plentiful. Singapore, at its core, is a center for arbitrage. It was established for arbitrage, but the British East India Company. We are where domains meet. We are where cultures have the cross currents. So when we deal with a Javanese, we are very polite, very subtle. When we deal with an Australian, we have to be forthright, or we will not be understood. When we deal with Chinese, well, we become Chinese. When we deal with Americans, we become Americans. This multi-channel capability is part of Singapore. Of course, within Singapore, not everybody is involved in the international network. They're involved in servicing the networks in Singapore. So I cook food, I clean the floor, I do swab tests, I may make furniture, I may be a farm worker, I provide muscle power. Thinking hands, good craftsmanship. In fact, the majority of people living in the city are not involved in the international network. It's a minority. But that minority, they like our city. But without the people beavering away every day to keep the city clean and functioning, there's no, the light will not be lit. In every city, therefore, there is a certain tension between the international element, not all of which is Singaporean, and those who keep the city going. This is the town-gown dichotomy, which I like, which is a metaphor I like to use. There's a gown which is internationally connected, and there's a town which keeps it going, and the town expects the gown to bless it. Because if you, from the gown, try to boss, lord over me, please leave. I don't need you. But if you are courteous, you bring opportunities, jobs, yes, of course. It's a wonderful symbiotic relationship. In the case of Singapore, there is tension between town and gown. There's a feeling that, oh, the foreigners are taking over. Too many have become Singaporeans. They are squeezing into us. We feel uncomfortable. It's not that we are xenophobic. We know that without the international networks, Singapore is nothing. But at the same time, we are the masters here, and they can't come here and lord it over us. They are guests. If they're good guests, they find that we are splendid hosts. But if they misbehave, well, we should cut them off. This tension will grow because the world is changing. I mean, if we use Karl Marx's idea of productive forces, the productive forces are changing because of technology. All networks, all hierarchies are being disintermediated. Social media, the revolution in communication, computational capacity, all dendritic connections have ossified. Instead, new synaptic links are being formed. We have to capture them. As Singapore becomes alive, vital, of the future, not just of the past. A city is never static. It goes through progression. It grows, it plateaus, it can decline. And therefore, the future life of a city is always a challenge. Singapore has done well. Singapore enjoys certain advantages as a city-state because when we are a city-state, we have borders, which means we can control what comes in, what goes out. That which we want, flow in and out freely. That which we don't want, we keep out. We don't always succeed, but we try. We have a semi-permeable membrane in Singapore, which in fact consumes a lot of our effort and energy in many of our ministries. Not just the SCF, the police, it's our internal security, it's all border patrols, it's our entire medical services, a whole system of manpower control. It ensures that we have some autonomy. If we are part of a big country, we are not masters of our destiny. And sometimes our interests are not aligned with the interests of the larger country. And even when there are opportunities, we can't reach out to grab them. We can as a city-state. But a city-state is vulnerable. We can be eaten up. So we've got to worry about security, which then requires a different network to secure our existence. So this is a very interesting subject, and Singapore, it's a good case study. We make mistakes. We've had some brilliant successes, but the future is always a question mark.
Do you think Singapore will be among the great cities in the region and in the world in the year 2030 or 2040? And what do you think we have to do to keep it to be great? What do you think the role of openness, you talked of it earlier, Tang Gao. I'm going to take this up. The attitude to having a new population, is that also important? Attitudes to openness to a great city.
Cities derive their energy from the networks they serve. If the networks thrive, cities can potentially thrive. Cities are in competition, so one will thrive better than others. Some will thrive better than others. Some will decline. If we look at the region as a whole, at Asia, the prospects are very bright. China, India, Southeast Asia, more than half the world's population, marching to the open space. No reason why, year by year, as the people get more educated, as infrastructure improves, they will not carry the economic weight in the world. And we are smack right in the middle. And if we position ourselves well, both in terms of connectivity and software, then our prospects are bright. There's no guarantee because we're in competition with others. And there's always the possibility that we may make bad mistakes. For example, the current tension between the US and China will mark this period of history, and it will go on for years to come. Mentally, we should be prepared for easily 10, 20, 30 years of tension between them. Sometimes high tension, sometimes low tension, sometimes even the possibility of skirmishes out at sea, or proxy wars. And we will be caught in between. If we're just a city-state, we'll find ourselves frequently between a rock and a hard place, and injured. We need ASEAN. We need the region. We need to be organically reconnected to the region. When the colonial powers were here, we were all connected to the metropolitan powers. Then after we became independent, stripped our hinterland, we pole vaulted to become a global city. We brought the MNCs here. We became more familiar with America and Japan than we were in Thailand or Laos or Indonesia. It's unnatural, it's not organic, and it's not sustainable. We have to go back to the region, which means rerouting ourselves in ASEAN. In a sense, COVID has forced us in this direction. The period of helter-skelter globalization is past. And everywhere now, if nothing else but for self-preservation, and just in case, we are localizing. And with social distancing and lockdowns, all of us in Singapore are discovering our neighborhoods. Oh, there's a footpath here. Oh, there's a beautiful park. I didn't know there was this restaurant. And neighborhoods have come alive again in Singapore. And we feel happy about it. People are beginning to know one another in the neighborhood, which they should have right from the beginning. This should extend to our neighbors, Malaysia to Indonesia, Laos, Cambodia. This is our region. We are civilizations. We are citizens of ASEAN. Now, if we can play this right, be a capital city of ASEAN, not the capital city, but a capital city, and we have the potential for this because all the other 9 countries have sizable communities in Singapore. So we're really linked to all of them. And carefully play the larger forces, the US, China, Europe, Japan, India, others. Don't take sides. If anyone pushes us too hard, we'll work within ASEAN to lean a little to the other side. And ASEAN being completely non-threatening to the major powers, ASEAN, if it plays its cards right, has no substitute in the world. We become a convener. Everybody, it's common for the big powers to say ASEAN centrality. They don't always believe it. But since we insist on it, they have got to go along. And they like to say, ASEAN the driver's seat. Not because ASEAN is a good driver. If ASEAN wears thick glasses and very often gets lost. But at least ASEAN will not take the car in the wrong direction where they don't want to go. So they said, no, you're the safest for us. So you be in the driver's seat. In this way, we turn the weakness into our strength. And we turn the larger forces as an opportunity to drive our own propellers. So the leaders of the city fathers, they've got to see far, they've got to anticipate conflicts, the dangerous possibilities, and say, no, we move in this direction, we service these networks. We are part of many networks, of the American network, of the Chinese network, of the Indian network. And every network tries to capture us, right? Naturally. So we have to be careful. ISD has to be very careful to make sure that we are not captured by anybody. We are friendly to everybody, but we are autonomous. So people say, how can you be having surveillance and restricting freedom and so on? It's absolutely necessary to maintain our autonomy. The more we are alert, the more we are aware, the more we can freely link up. If we are not, if we are sloppy, if we let things happen, very quickly the gates we have to be shut. So this is Singapore. It's a high wire act, and what TAIPEI just said, what the founding fathers did for us, have brought us here. But we need leadership of equal quality to take us into the future. Then it'll be the future you talk about.
It's time to take the questions from the audience. And it has been indicated in this pad that the top voted question is a question that, George, you partly touched on already in your answer about Singapore and the connectivity of connections, reconnecting with ASEAN. But the question is phrased this way. How can Singapore as a city-state continue to thrive in the context of conflicting spheres of influence between China and the US? Would we have to compromise our sovereignty? And this comes from Jonathan Tan, but many have voted, that they would like to hear this question answered. So further elaboration on your earlier idea.
The challenge is always not outside, but inside us. Who are we as Singaporeans? Is Singapore just a facility, just a convention center, a good hotel, a restaurant? Or is it something more than that? Does it stand for values which others are happy to associate with? I think Singapore is special because our different communities retain their ancestral cultures and are proud of their ancestral cultures. And we encourage them to be proud of their ancestral cultures. So our diversity is not based upon everybody curbing himself to become a Singaporean, but everybody being bigger in accepting others who are not like themselves. If we can make this happen, that to be Singaporean is to make you bigger than what you were when you were in China or India or Indonesia or Thailand. That when you are here, you're still Thai, but you are a Thai who now understands more and accepts better people who are non-Thai. A Chinese who feel for India, an Indian who understands China. Then to be a Singaporean is to become bigger. If to be a Singaporean means that you become smaller, you have to cut off links, you've got to suppress yourself, then only people who become Singaporean are those who think that our passport is more convenient, that the tax regimes are advantageous, and we are stepping stone. So in the end, the most fundamental question is, who are we as a city? What is our identity? What do we stand for? Yes, we are 3/4 Chinese. If we are just another Chinese city, we are ho-hum. Yes, we speak English. But when we go to the West and they congratulate us that we are very good in our English, we are embarrassed. Because for many of us, English is our first language, not our second language. So we have to think deeply. Who are we? And how do we relate to one another? I'm greatly inspired by the Swiss. They are German, French, Italian, Romansh. They are Protestants and Catholics. But in a crisis, they bunch together. They are compatriots. Of course, they have a long history, over 700 years. But we must constantly try to get there. Then it'd be wonderful that everybody wants to be Singaporean. And if you want to say, oh, I'm sorry, you don't meet our criterion because you are too narrow-minded. You look down on other Singaporeans. You can't get along with people of other races. You are too bigoted. Sorry. It's okay. You'll be here as a professional. We'll make use of you. But you will not become a citizen. These are questions which we have to wrestle with in Singapore. It goes back to how we raise our children, how we relate to our neighbors. It used to be in the old Malaya that we look forward to each other's festivals. If it's Hari Raya, I know the pineapple tarts will arrive. If Deepavali, I'm looking forward to my biryani. Chinese New Year, ang paos. Today, the tendency is, this is a time to take a vacation. Hold on. I go somewhere else because this is not my celebration. So only the MPs will have to turn up.
The question is on competitiveness. Many cities focus on certain areas. For instance, to be a cultural hub, financial hub, transport hub. As a city-state, what does Singapore need to be? Maybe all or none of the above. And where should it focus on to be globally competitive? Josh, you were Minister of Trade and Industry.
The heart of Singapore's economy is arbitrage. We can never be the best chemist or the best manufacturer or the best accountant in the world. But we are where domains intersect. And where domains intersect, there's always a lot of energy between high and low, between plus and minus, between positive and negative. We are part of China, we're part of Indonesia, we're part of India, we're part of the West. All the domains intersect here. Our standards are accepted by all of them. When I was health minister, we found that Lingzi products from Japan were all past our tests. From China, many contain heavy metal. So we destroyed entire batches. After a while, importers made sure that their Lingzi were clean. They came to Singapore. We were not watching for efficacy, just for heavy metal contamination. And I discovered to my delight that Chinese tourists, when they came to Singapore, would buy herbs from China in Singapore because they knew that Singapore maintained higher standards than China. Anthony Salim once told me that when his flour is produced in Singapore, they fetch a higher value than the flour he produces in Indonesia because it's made in Singapore. So the maintenance of standards puts us in a different position. People trust us. And after a while, the role of a hub. I want to buy cheap, I go to Singapore. I want to sell dear, I go to Singapore. I want to travel faster, I go through Singapore. I want to be healthier, I go through Singapore. I want to be better educated, I go through Singapore. Not that we are the best in originating everything. No, but we know how to source, how to unbundle and rebundle and repackage so that it's worth your while and like a little margin for ourselves. So our economic competitiveness relies upon our ability to understand different markets, different domains, and no one can touch it. Hong Kong could, but Hong Kong now, the national security law, we have to go through a period of difficulty. I'm very optimistic for Hong Kong, but it will take time. But for the next 10 years, Singapore has no competitor in this space within 1,000 miles.
Now, I'm going to ask a question myself before I take an audience question. It's on urban diplomacy. We know in past history, George, and you follow this, that there were many military alliances and mutual assistance between cities. And you have the Hanseatic League, the Lombard League, and cities helped each other. Many in Europe, In today's world, we have something called C40. It is an alliance of cities which want to work together, mayors in cities, so that they can have an impact, their voice can be heard in the climate change negotiations. And they feel the sense of urgency more than some of the leaders in the capital, and they can push ahead. Now, do you see city diplomacy, urban diplomacy, having a real place, and being able to push for things much faster and more effectively than sovereign states? And cities can help cities. I'll come to you too, Tiger.
I'll leave it to you too.
The Westphalian system of nation states is not going to go away for a long time. So cities have got to abide by national policies. And therefore, there's a limit to which Singapore as a city-state can develop autonomous relationships with cities which are part of larger countries. But beneath the nation-state, there are many things that we can do together to mutual benefit. And this we should do. We can learn from one another. We can help one another. When I was Trade Minister, I worked for closer links with Johor, but very conscious that Kuala Lumpur must bless our efforts. The governors of Sumatra, or the provinces of Sumatra, they met regularly. I The thick skin said, you include Singapore. Treat Singapore as a province of Sumatra. They laughed. Because they weren't sure whether I was serious or just joking, you know. I said, no. Look at the map. We are part of Real Sumatra. I mentioned this to the Indonesian trade minister. So I got her blessing. And they invited me. Every time they had a meeting, they meet among themselves. Then they'll have a subsequent meeting plus one in Singapore. And so we developed relationships with Jambi, with Bengkulu, with South Sumatra, North Sumatra, and so on. And this helped secure supplies. We had a group which cooperated on firefighting in Jambi. The governor used to help his father supply rubber to a Mr. Sim at Singapore River. So he had feelings for Singapore. We should always build up these links with our neighbors, with other cities. And the little things we can do with one another, it will enrich Singapore, it will enrich them. And we create a psychology where your welfare is also my welfare. When your forests burn, I get the smoke. When my waters are polluted, you are affected. We look after each other's back. And that's good. But we have to work within the Westphalian state system.
姐妹们总烦恼脸上细纹、干燥与暗沉，现在起跟我一起放心交给 KS Royal Face 皇家颜值逆时奇迹系列。KS Royal Face 皇家颜值逆时奇迹系列，它添加5种 EGF， 专门防止肌肤老化。强化皮肤修复，增加肌肤弹性水嫩，轻松抚平皱纹，换回青春自信。KS Royal Face 皇家颜值逆时奇迹，活肤露、全效精华、精华霜，即刻启动冻龄密码。